you are following the first prophet, the 9th prophet, or the 1000th prophet, there is no contradiction, because every prophet was giving the same message, to worship God alone. So if we worship God alone, we were in fact following the teachings of all the prophets. No contradiction. And remember, it is following the teachings of the prophet. There's no imposition. We are not forced to do anything. It is whether we voluntarily choose to adopt that practice as our way of life, which will guarantee us paradise. And this is a very, very important aspect, because there are those who will let us believe that there are different religions. They say, look at all these different practices. These are different religions. There is no different religion. There's only one religion, the worship of God, and one false religion, the worship of the jinn who is the rebel. If we are true to the true teachings of our prophets, we would recognize that since every prophet came from God, if we recognize that the teachings of all the prophets are the same, if we recognize the fact that there was a need for more than one prophet. Why? The time that man is going to exist on earth is a fixed period of time. And the way we see time and the way time exists in paradise is completely different. In our life, 50 million years may be the equivalent of just one day in celestial time. Let's call it God time or celestial time. Now, we are living in this period, which may be many millions of years, but our lifespan is only about 60 to 80 years for most of us. So what's going to happen? We are going to live, we're going to die, new generation will come, they are going to die, and so on. So there is going to be a need for more prophets, so that the message may be preserved. And also people were living in different places all over the earth. So there was a need for different prophets to carry this message to all the people. But the message was always the same. That being the case, we are obliged to follow the teachings of God's prophet. Now let us look at this in perspective and let us understand this clearly. And I'm going to give you an analogy to help us understand it. Because man had gone through a process of acquiring knowledge, of becoming educated, and changing his world for his benefit, lots of changes were going to occur during a certain period of time. And man's guidance had to be appropriate to the time in which he was living. And so God gave us the teachings that was appropriate to that particular time. But the time came when the teachings of God had now reached its finality, and that man had reached a certain level which will now be his status till the end of time, and a time when God could complete his teachings and say, now I have perfected my religion for you. And this final comprehensive message will be delivered with who? By his last prophet. Whoever was chosen to be that last prophet will deliver this message. And that is what God did. And God delivered this message in the form of a text which God has promised to protect. In the past, the written word was not widespread and not well known. But by the time of the existence of the last prophet, the written word was common, and God had decided that the best way to preserve this was in this form, and God has promised that he will protect and preserve this text till the last day, so that whichever human being lives on earth till the last day, he will have access to God's teachings, preserved in this text. Let us look at it like this. Let us say, for example, God had decided that he is going to send his teachings to us via angels who will come to a particular mountain. And every so often an angel will come down at that mountain and deliver God's message to us. What would our response to this be? I would imagine that we would make sure that there will be somebody there 24 hours a day, and whenever an angel comes with a message, this information will be dispersed to everyone almost as quickly as we could. And as each angel came with a new message, we would pass that on and we would all accept it, because we know this has come from God. So if God, for example, initially allowed us to marry our daughters and then tells us, now it is forbidden for you to marry your daughter, that is what we would do. We would not say, oh, but previously you said we can marry them, so we're going to continue marrying them. We'll say, God has now said that is no longer acceptable. We will follow the new teaching. And then if God says, you are no longer allowed to consume alcohol, what will we do? We will accept God's teaching. We won't say, previously you said we can take it, so we are going to continue taking it. If God says you are now not allowed to take interest, we will obey it, would we not? And that is exactly what has happened with the prophets that came down with time. Let us look at this from a slightly different aspect to help us understand this a little better. Let us say human beings didn't die, except by some accident where we were crushed or decapitated. We would otherwise not die, and we would live till the end of time. There would be the need for only one prophet. And this prophet would give us the teachings from God. As time went on, he will give us the new teachings. Would we complain and object and say, hey, why are you telling us now we can't marry our daughters when we could marry them before? We will accept it because God has now told us this and the prophet has told us this. So the fact that this teaching has come from a prophet who is now living at a later time doesn't change the fact that we have to listen to this prophet because he is God's prophet. If we hold on to older teachings and not move on to the newer teachings, we are picking and choosing. We are no longer following God. We are following our own desires, what we wish to pick and choose. We are no longer worshippers of God. We are worshippers of ourselves. And our prayers do not get answered. If we wish for our prayers to be answered, if we wish to qualify for paradise, we have to listen to God's prophets. We have to follow his latest, authentic guidance. If you were to buy the 9th edition of a textbook, and you see that it's different from the 5th edition, would you say, I reject the 9th edition, I'm only going to accept the 5th edition? No, we accept the latest conclusive evidence. And this was presented by the last prophet. And the last prophet, in addition to teaching the 4 aspects that all prophets taught, that there is only one God, that we must pray and how to pray, that we must give in charity, and that we must fast, observe periods of abstinence, there was a 5th aspect which was specific for the last prophet and was not applicable to any of the other prophets, because this last prophet was not sent to any particular person but was sent to all of mankind. And because this message was universal, those who are gifted and blessed and find God and learn God's message and practice it will find themselves living all over the world. And this 5th aspect was pilgrimage, where people can come at one point to meet one another, get to know one another as they worship God and pray to God. So that was the 5 pillars of the teachings given by the last prophet of God, which all believers of God will accept as God's prophet, and whose teachings we will accept, because as worshippers of God we have to respect all God's prophets, and we have to accept the teaching that's come from the last prophet, because this is the teaching that God wants us to have. God's decision, God's knowledge for us is for us whether we accept it. So, that is the essence of what I wanted to present in this segment, because we know about who we are. We now understand that the message that was given for us is a universal message, the same message by all the prophets. And as believers in God, we should be following that message if we want to be accepted by God. And to help us understand why there are these different prophets, how messages have changed over time, and that should not fool us into thinking that there are different religions. There are no different religions. There is only one religion, the worship of God. And we all should be one in this. But we cannot impose anything on anyone. There is free will, and that has to be respected. We now come to the end of this part, and in the next segment we look at a very important aspect: man's role in society. You will find me making reference to my monitor, which is below the camera here, as I go through the various points. So if I look away from you, that is what I'm looking at. So if you need to go and get a cup of tea, come back and we will go to part number 3.